Welcome to the Kernel of Truth. I'm Colonel Conrad Reynolds along with Will Huff.
Hello, hello, hello.
And we're here for another episode. This is the 23rd of February. It's cold out there today, isn't it, Will?
Yeah,
It's a
chilly
little chilly
for Arkansas.
Yeah, and it was chilly in D.C. We were in D.C. last week for an election integrity summit at the Gold Institute with General Flynn and a lot of other people.
Yeah, we had a lot of special guests, people even working in the administration.
Yeah, Carrie Lake. Yeah. Carrie Lake came, and she gave a great speech.
Roger Stone lit into the Republicans at the end of the...
he lit into them. It was really good, and the whole idea of this summit was to determine where we need to go when it comes to election integrity in the future. I mean, the president is already on it. We had Kurt Olson there. We had many other folks from the administration trying to move forward with ideas and what needs to be fixed. I think they already know. Yeah. But it was a good meeting for a lot of the people who've only met people over Zoom and phone calls to actually
tweets
be
and
tweets to be there in person. And one familiar face that I saw in the audience was a guy by the name of Ralph Pezzullo. Now, Ralph is a great guy. He's the author of a wonderful book, and we've mentioned it on this program many times, called Stolen Elections, The Takedown. If you look at this is the book that they've put out just a few months ago, a wonderful book that really talks about the genesis of this whole fiasco we've had with these electronic machines and what they've done to Arkansas. I mean, not just Arkansas, but American elections. And one of the main sources of this book is a guy by the name of Gary Bernsten, and we've talked about Gary a long time CIA operative who's worked like you would not believe across the world with another individual, Martine Rodil, who are just great people, great sources. And Ralph was able to take all of their information and put it into a wonderful book. So I asked Ralph, I said, would you mind coming on the Kernel of Truth here in our radio program? Because really and truly, people need to hear what this story. And he said, absolutely. So I've got, for our program today, Ralph and Gary. Welcome to the show, both of you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I really would like for you to start it off, Ralph, because about how you came to know the information that's in this book and how you decided to put it and how you organized it and what it tells us about our election system here in America.
Okay, well, let me start. I live in Los Angeles, and in about the spring of 2024, a friend of mine said he wanted to introduce me to the most interesting man he knew and a great source for the DEA. And so I went to lunch and I met a man named Martine Rodil, a fascinating man, and I asked him what he was working on. And he said, I'm working on election fraud. And I was, of course, immediately intrigued because as many of us experienced during the 2020 election, common sense told me, something is really drastically wrong here with this result. And Martine said, if you're not busy tomorrow, I can show you a presentation that I put together. So I went to a house in Malibu and I saw a 4-hour presentation that was very detailed and absolutely blew me away. And it was based on a 4-year or 3.5-year investigation that he and his partner, Gary Bernsten, who I knew, Gary and I are good friends, and wrote the bestseller Jawbreaker together about his going into Afghanistan after 9/11 and working with the Northern Alliance and having overthrowing the Taliban within 3 weeks and then chasing bin Laden into Tora Bora. If people haven't read that story, they need to, because it's amazing.
Fascinating story. Anyway, it is. I agree with you.
It is. It's incredible. So after the meeting, I said to Martine, what can I do to help you? And he said, we want you to write a book. And so I went about writing a book, and what the story basically starts with Gary and Martine, who were doing investigations. They're government whistleblowers, and they were doing investigations into the money laundering that was being done by the Cartel de los Soles. Now, the cartel, it's important for people to understand that the Cartel de los Soles is basically the criminal organization behind the Maduro Chavez regime in Venezuela. And it's run by the military, and they are the biggest transnational criminal organization in the world now. They control all drug trafficking in the Western Hemisphere. And Gary and Martine were recruiting sources within this criminal investigation. And some of the sources were referring to election machines, that there were also the Venezuelan government and the Cartel de los Soles was involved in stealing US elections with the use of electronic voting machine software. They were definitely intrigued. And after the 2020 election, they started to shift their investigation from money laundering into the election fraud mechanism of the Venezuelan government and Cartel de los Soles. And basically what they learned is that this started in 2003 when Hugo Chavez, who was the military leader and president of Venezuela, was facing a recall. And it looked as though he was going to lose this recall. And his Cuban handlers, and he was very, very close to Fidel Castro, they came to him and said, Hugo, you're going to lose unless you figure a way to alter the results, because the polls show you quite a bit behind. And he didn't know, he was like, well, what do I do? And they said, well, there's a new thing called electronic voting machines. They're just starting to be introduced. And maybe if you find some engineers who can come up with software that can be used to manipulate the results of the voting machines, you might have something. So they went out and they recruited 3 Venezuelan computer engineers from Simón Bolívar University, which is their top university in Venezuela, the equivalent of our MIT. And these gentlemen were Antonio Mujica, Alfredo Jose Anzola, and Roger Piñate. And they sent them off, and these gentlemen came up with software that they had to. They didn't have election machines, so they bought touchscreen banking machines from Olivetti in Italy, and they installed this software into those machines. And the referendum of 2004 in Venezuela was conducted on those machines, and they were able to switch the result for Hugo Chavez. He was extremely pleased, as was Fidel Castro, and they gave these gentlemen $200 million and said, further develop this software and these machines, and let's try them out on elections in Latin America. In the early 2000s, there were a series of elections in Latin America, in Nicaragua, in Ecuador, in Bolivia, in Argentina, in which leftists surprisingly won despite what was expected in the polls. And this was all because of this election software and these election machines. This was a dream come true for Fidel Castro, because since the early 70s, he had spent lots of resources trying to establish guerrilla bases in countries in Latin America to try to overthrow the governments there and install socialist communist regimes. Now they were able to do it with just the use of electronic voting machines. So this was like, for them, they thought a stroke of genius. They continued to develop this software, and they set out to conquer the United States. They set up a company called Smartmatic, and the headquarters were in Boca Raton, Florida, with these same 3 computer engineers. And they went out and what they did is they tried to hide the Venezuelan ownership, and they did that through various kind of corporate shell games and games that they were playing. And they started to try to win contracts to run elections in key districts in the United States. Now, this started in 2006, and there were several people in 2006 in the United States who stepped forward and questioned what was this new company and who really owned it. And one of those people was Representative Carolyn Mahoney from New York. And she went to the Treasury Department and she said, something about this doesn't seem right to me. Who really owns this company? And the truth was it was owned by Venezuela. So these engineers, what they did is they sold the company. They bought another election company, a small election company that had been in business for a while, called Sequoia, and they tried to use that as another apparatus to hide the Venezuelan government ownership, because the Venezuelan government owned the source code, which is the DNA of this election malware, right?
Right.
And they continue to own that source code. But they've been able.
Can I jump in, Ralph?
Yeah, sure.
Just
Hey, Gary.
two things quickly. Is that it was Carolyn Maloney of New York City, of the Fashion District, Democrat, that was the one that questioned the ownership, and the reason was she had someone in her office, or someone knew someone involved in the technology, because she actually wrote a letter to Secretary of Treasury John Snow where she identified the technology, HAAT, hat technology. And so that was the key technology, and it still remains key technology in the architecture of this system, this electronic voting system. And Ralph was correct that they came in and they purchased Sequoia, but Sequoia wasn't that small. Sequoia had been around for 100 years, and the initial purchase of this, even though they only paid $16 million, the Venezuelan cut a deal with the company that actually owned it to allow them to take over their printing presses in their country for money and passports and all of that. Because in those days, a contract just for one state was a $45 million for electronic voting, and they only paid $16 million for it. So there was a deal behind this scene, so to speak. And so the purchase of Sequoia, though, was something very, very big. And the government, and as Ralph said, there was an investigation. They started looking at them, and it was CFIUS that did the investigation. And CFIUS wanted to know, who are you? Who are you? And of course, we knew, and we collected their corporate documents. And after 2020, everyone was, when it was first brought out that Smartmatic and Dominion, these companies were affiliated with Venezuela, everybody was denying it. But all you had to do to go was to the Florida Business Registration. And you could see the three owners of the company, the men that Ralph mentioned, Antonio Mujica, Alfredo Anzola, and Roger Peñate. But there was a fourth guy there. Omar Montilla is on the registration. And he was the chief of staff for the dictator, Hugo Chavez. When the chief of staff for a dictator owns the company, you probably should recognize that it's probably the dictator's company, I mean, it's kind of common sense.
You think?
Yeah, you think.
Doesn't this seem like something that should have been explored before these guys were in our elections?
All of their corporate records, Ralph covered them in detail in the book. They were all laid out. Martin and I had one of our researchers who was a Venezuelan guy, real smart, got into I think it's sunbiz.com. It's a public website. You go in, and all of these things were in the open for everyone to see. And something? Back then, almost 15, 20 years ago, Lou Dobbs and Katie Pilgrim. Do you remember Katie Pilgrim?
Oh, yeah.
She was on CNN with Lou Dobbs. She would do those shows with him.
I've seen the clip you're talking about.
They called them out. And not only did they call them out, the State Department, Ambassador Brownfield in Caracas, wrote a cable that questioned the honesty, the validity, the fact that Smartmatic was a dirty company. From the beginning, there's a State Department message and that we've recovered. And so the point is that people in the United States people who were stealing elections in the Democratic Party, they knew what they were doing. Leaders are there, and there were some Republicans that knew too. There was all sorts of evidence. And when we brought this up, Martine and I started bringing this up, it was quickly suppressed. Every possibility has been made for the past 4 or 5 years. People come up now and they make all sorts of excuses that all these cases there's one and you shouldn't look at this and judges have delivered on this. That is a lie. It's all a lie to keep those machines in place so that elections can be stolen and our constitutional republic can be taken from us.
I got a question for you guys. So a lot of this stuff has been uncovered, and these names have been brought out in public. The names of the people who started Smartmatic, their connections to the Venezuelan regime, and are these guys, obviously they've been expelled from all election companies henceforth, right?
No, they haven't. They're still in business.
That was a rhetorical question. Baby, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Let me just say this.
Yeah.
When Ralph wrote the book, God bless him, and it's written very, very well. First off, no one has sued us. None of the statements, no one has taken legal action against us. Of course, Rudy Giuliani and Sidney and all sorts of people have faced all sorts of legal peril and had their licenses taken from them and have been sued, like Patrick Byrne. Patrick Byrne was critical to all this, the financing of us, and he became the third leg of the stool, But, me and Martine haven't been sued because nobody wants to go to discovery with us, because we have the source code too. Our sources, we recruited human sources in the middle of this crime who actually helped build the system, who deployed the system, who managed the system. We recruited a dozen people that participated in this process. We have brought them to the Department of Justice to testify in front of people. They've given testimony. And so, but there's a major effort to suppress the book that Ralph has written.
Mm-hmm.
And
let me just continue with the evolution here.
Keep going, Ralph.
Once they that was so great. Once they bought Sequoia, mm-hmm. they applied for the contract in California to run the elections in California State. And at that time, there had to be a review by the Secretary of State of California. So the Secretary of State hired computer engineers, experts from MIT, Berkeley, etc. And these people looked at the software, and they came back with a report that basically said it looks as though this software was designed to steal elections. Not to have a secure election, but to steal it, because there are all kinds of backdoors that are built into this software. So, of course, they rejected it for California. Now, what happened was that several years later, that was during Arnold Schwarzenegger's reign as governor of California. Several years later, Jerry Brown, a Democrat, was elected governor, and they got rid of that requirement that the Secretary of State has to review the software. And so Smartmatic ended up winning the contract for LA County, which is the biggest county in California. And they still have that contract. What the owners of Smartmatic did at that point is that they sold Sequoia to a company called Dominion, which operated in Ontario. They really own the company, but they pretended to sell it again to try to confuse people. And what they did is they made an arrangement whereby Dominion would run the key voting districts in the United States, and then they would use Smartmatic to try to market their software overseas. Today, based on Gary and Martine's research, Smartmatic runs elections in 72 countries around the world. And Dominion runs the elections in the key voting districts in the United States. But the other point is that the same Venezuelan software is also migrated into other election companies in the United States. So they basically control our elections. Our elections are controlled by foreign enemies China found out about this system, and they have invested huge amounts of money. The machines, the parts of the machines are made
Hardware.
in China and then sent to Taiwan, where these machines are assembled. So again, it's all subterfuge. They can say, "Oh no, the machines are made in Taiwan." Well, yeah, they're assembled in Taiwan, but the parts are Chinese.
You know, we hear here.
Actually, some of it. I'm sorry. Some of it is assembled in Texas. You know, some of these parts were being sent to Dell.
Yeah.
You know, so some of it was assembled in Taiwan and labeled for a factory there, and some of the parts are sent to America. But the hardware is from the People's Republic of China.
And can I interject one thing? Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think also we have discovered over the last several months that most of the Smartmatic software is in the machines that are pushed by the USAID, and USAID is funding just every country that we have pushed to get machines. They have to use the Smartmatic machine.
Well,
that's another part of this, Will. It's very disturbing. Yeah.
So the U.S. government is paying for these.
We are marketing. We are marketing
them.
Yeah, and embassies across the world are putting pressure on host governments to adapt this system of malware, right? And when Elon Musk and Doge started to look at the federal budget and they started to look at AID, they came across something called CEPS, which is called the Consortium of Elections and Political Process Strengthening. And CEPS was being funded to the tune of billions of dollars. And it was basically the marketing arm of Smartmatic. So that's another very, very troubling aspect of this, that our government, that our intelligence service probably was marketing this software around the world.
Right. With the intention of being able to manipulate elections.
$6.9 billion spent by USAID to finance the Smartmatic machines in at least 30 of the 70 countries that we're talking around the world. And it was the U.S. government that called and implored them to use it. I had the country of Georgia, I had the National Security Advisor and the Minister of Interior call me after the Russians stole their election from them in Georgia, and right after our election, because they had seen a video I had done, this was before the book came out, to talk to me, and they told me that the U.S. Embassy had called them, told them they wanted them to use the Smartmatic machines and helped finance it. And USAID paid for the theft of that election.
Wow. So we have bad elections in both Georgias then, huh?
Georgia, the United States, and Georgia, the country, Yerevan. Yeah, not Yerevan, Tbilisi.
So
Tbilisi.
In Arkansas here, we get told we have ES&S machines, and Republicans get elected consistently. So we have absolutely nothing to worry about. Plus, the machines aren't online. What would you say to Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who repeats these kind of lines, or her administration and the elected officials here who repeat those lines? What would you say to them?
Well,
what I would say to them,
not true.
I'd like to jump in.
Yeah.
For ES&S, one of the individuals that was heavily involved in the development of that ES&S technology was a gentleman with the last name Reyes Zumeta. And he is one of the very early Venezuelan employees of Smartmatic and the Consejo Nacional Electoral. And so Reyes Zumeta was involved in the development of fraudulent software, and he was involved with ES&S. And I would be very, very concerned about any sort of technology that came from him.
And these machines are connected to servers, even though people say that they're not. They are connected to servers, and the servers, the big servers, are in Serbia, and they're run on Huawei servers that are provided by China. So this is an international conspiracy of enemies of the United States. It includes Cuba, Venezuela, China, Serbia, and Russia, and Iran to attack the United States from within. A key apparatus of our democracy, a key is the ability for people to vote, to express their individual opinions. It's supposed to be a government for the people, by the people, and instead, foreign enemies are controlling a key part of it. And there, as Gary mentioned earlier, there are a lot of people in the United States who have been compromised and who don't and are trying to cover this up. They're trying to silence us and tell people, this isn't real, because they want to continue. They want to be the ones who control us. And instead, the American people are going to have to listen to what we're saying, read the book, call their representatives, protest, and say, this is not the country that we want. We don't want our country run by intelligence officers in our country and working with foreign enemies.
Speaking of the intelligence officers, we've been hearing a lot that there's the investigations are being suppressed by some of our three-lettered agencies in the U.S. And you guys named names of people who are working against the nation. And like you said, they haven't sued you yet. But would you guys want to dig into that a little more?
Gary?
Well, I wanted to go back just 1 second on something that Ralph said first, really important. The swing states in the United States were handled out of Serbia. Why? Out of Belgrade, Serbia. The owner of Dominion, the CEO of Dominion, John Polis, who people saw on CNN with, being interviewed by 60 Minutes by Anderson Cooper, was interviewing him, was a CNN journalist. John Polis had a college roommate or classmate by the name of Oren Obradovic, and he was a Serb. So he opened an office in Belgrade, Serbia, that was like the research office for Dominion. And so Dominion then was able to manage the swing states in the United States, those key states that decide who wins the presidency. From that office, they had 98 system administrations who were Serbians, Venezuelans, and a few Chinese. We know Huawei servers, and they were linked into Hong Kong. There was they were protected by the BIA, the Serbian Counterintelligence Service was helping them. And of course, John Polis being interviewed lied about all of this. And this is how they were able to, from afar, because all of these machines were connected. There was connectivity to the internet. They were not supposed to be, but they all were. And it was all a gigantic lie that those machines were not connected. They said it again and again. No, they're not connected to the internet. Not connected. They were connected. You could get it via the internet. You could get it on satellite phone. You could get it on cell phone. There was like 3 or 4 different ways then. And eventually we would build the engineering. When we would recruit a number of these guys, we actually did very, very specific engineering where we learned how they entered, what tools they used to enter, where they hid the keys to open the system, how they use those keys to open the system, enter, change an election, how they backed out, how they covered their tracks completely, and you couldn't see that they had been in there. And then all the other components of this. This was the science of election theft. This is the greatest crime against the United States since the Civil War. This was an effort to take over America using electronic election machines. And people that tell you that this is not true are lying. They're either fools or they're just bold-faced lying. And it was an alignment of the Cartel del Solis. It was the Soros organization, and it was the Democratic Party of the United States. Not all of them, but the key ones, the leaders, all lined up together. And there were some Republicans that knew what was going on, and they got to use the system as well. They paid. They had to pay for the privilege, but they knew what they were doing. This is the essence of the crime. Now, Will asked, what were our intelligence services involved? We have very, very specific information that individuals who were involved in the building of the machine, the marketing of the machine, the security for all of this, were involved with the Venezuelan and the Cuban regime. That they were assets of the Central Intelligence Agency and at the same time working on the machines. So this is really troubling. Very, very troubling that individuals who are affiliated with our intelligence service, our premier clandestine service, where I worked for many years, were being paid by the CIA, and at the same time they were working on those machines and colluding with the cartel. It's a terrible story. This will come out, and a lot of people will, and it will be so damaging to the Central Intelligence Agency that you just can't imagine it.
Well, I know that you've reported this, and my question is there any has there been any indicator that they're going to move forward, the FBI or whoever is going to investigate this? I mean, there's enough here from what you've said. They should be moving forward.
We have spoken to the people at the most senior level, and the most sensitive offices in the United States are aware now.
Right.
And they are aware now. It's taken a long time to access them, but they are aware. And actually, the President of the United States is aware, and he's been aware for a while about this. And the staff and the President has, and I know you have been involved in a lot of things, assisting behind the scenes to try to get this to the country right on these issues. I know you guys have carried a lot of water on this.
Yeah, and we have been at the targets of attack as well here in our little state of Arkansas. But I will tell you, I think when it all comes out, we're all going to be vindicated, and people are going to understand that we've been right all along, and they've been working on the wrong side of history.
Yes,
I got a question for you guys. There was a letter that came out from a former general named Hugo Carvajal. Could you guys explain that letter that he wrote and the significance of it in the United States election systems?
Hugo Carvajal was the chief of the DHSIM, the Directorate of Counterintelligence Military, and he's arrested. He was captured in Spain. He was extradited to New York. He is sitting in MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center over there in Brooklyn. He is a lawyer, and he has been found guilty of all sorts of crimes related to narco trafficking. But Carvajal has volunteered information through his attorney and has written a letter to the President of the United States that said, election theft is real. The government of Venezuela was involved in it. I assigned one of my deputies, a man by the name of Carlos Quintero, to oversee this. So the two people that led the election theft, the technical part of it, it was owned by the cartel, the machines, okay? But the leader, Delcy Rodriguez, her brother, Jorge Rodriguez, was the head of the Consejo Nacional Electoral and the political boss of this. But the technical boss below him was a general by the name of Carlos Quintero, who had worked for the man that Will just named. Will just correctly, Will named Hugo Carvajal, a.k.a. El Pollo. His nickname is the Chicken. Was the chief of, he was like, Hugo Chavez's Heinrich Himmler. He was the chief of the secret police there. He's in jail in America, and he's naming names. And he told the president, he told everyone in America, we've stolen your elections. And then a second general, Cleaver Alcala, who is also jailed in the United States for narco trafficking, through his lawyer, wrote a letter too saying, I also am telling you, the Venezuelan regime, the Cartel del Solis, built a company called Smartmatic and has been stealing elections globally. So you have two Venezuelan generals who are leading members of that government and were involved with the cartel, telling all of us that they were involved in the theft of elections. But all these stupid Americans who are trying to hide the fact are saying, no, there's no such thing here. And the U.S. government has refused to interview them in the prisons. No one from the FBI or the CIA or the Department of Justice have gone into the MDC or the other prison where Cleaver Alcala is, and they have not interviewed. Carvajal's attorney has said, please come. He's been here 2 years. He's the chief of a foreign intelligence service that was hostile to the United States, and no one has interviewed him. It is the greatest disgrace and failure of counterintelligence, maybe in the history of the country.
It is unthinkable.
And it's not just a failure.
Mm-hmm.
It is, ladies and gentlemen, this is massive corruption in our intelligence system. Think of it, any one of you. If you knew that a leading general from a hostile country was in your jail and you refused to go interview him. They haven't interviewed him. He's been 2 years here. They won't even if you don't believe him, wouldn't you go talk to him? They don't want to.
I think we
want
lost
to know.
Oh. Well, it defies common sense, Gary, and it's just like here in Arkansas, we have not one of our legislators. I think one. So we got 99.1% of all of our legislators, to include our governor, to include Sarah Huckabee Sanders, to include our attorney general, to include our current secretary of state. None of them believe that these machines can be manipulated. None of them. And they've all fought tooth and nail against hand-marked paper ballots that are hand-counted. They have done everything they can to destroy the movement here in Arkansas to make sure that the machines stay in place. And that is why it is unthinkable. Just like you're saying that no one would go interview someone, you just have to ask yourself, who has control, who has captured these people to make sure they don't do anything for election integrity?
Well, there's a part of this that we should also
Ralph.
introduce is that the Cartel del Soles, it generates an enormous amount of income, right? Over a couple $1 trillion, huge amounts of money, and they have donated to the George Soros's foundations, other organizations that are trying to undermine us, like Black Lives Matter, the trans movement, and so on. This is, people need to understand that this is like a coordinated attack against the United States. And they have, as you pointed out in Arkansas, and as Gary has pointed out, they have paid off there's a lot of corruption within our own system to leave these machines in place, because these are the key to their chokehold on our system. And unfortunately,
and on the world,
a lot of people and around the world, and a lot of people are involved in this and have been paid off. And this is something that we're going to have to fight for. The American people we're trying to make them more aware of this, because it's their choice. Do you want to have control of your government, or do you want it to just run wild and tell us what to do and be run by a group of people who we don't even know and we don't vote for?
Yeah, we say, do you want to be represented or do you want to be ruled? And right now we're being ruled. Right. And what the other thing I want to point out, this is not just a Democrat thing. This is both parties. This is a uniparty type problem where they control both parties. They control who gets elected on both sides.
Without a doubt. Conrad, one thing Ralph just brought up, and which we didn't talk about early, was the Cartel de los Soles is the largest, wealthiest, most powerful criminal organization in the history of the world. We know at a minimum they stole $2.7 trillion in the last 20 years. We've had others tell us it's probably closer to $4 trillion. But just imagine a $3 trillion criminal organization. They make the mafia look like pikers. Okay? I mean, these guys, when you have $3 trillion, they have more money than 90% of the countries in the world. And there's at least a dozen people in the Cartel de los Soles that have more money than the CIA for operations. A dozen of them have bigger budgets than the agency's Directorate of Operations. These guys, as Ralph indicated, buy influence. They buy influence in the United States. They own major corporations in the United States. They own stock in every major corporation and every bank. They have major positions. When you have $3 trillion, you don't know who they have. What they do is, there's a word I want your listeners to hear, and the word is testaferro or testaferra. Testaferro, masculine, is a front man. Testaferra, front woman. And they have a group of these people, a dozen or 2 dozen, that actually are standing in front of them, that take the investment, put it up, but it's the cartel. And they are the most powerful business entity, criminal entity that exists.
There was a name that was always brought up. Was it Mark Malek Brown? Was that his name?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He was the president of the Open Society Foundations and the president of Smartmatic. So he is a key figure in all of this. And the corruption that Gary is talking about, unfortunately, extends very high up throughout our political system, all the way to the White House. So President Trump right now is fighting a battle. He wants to release this information, and there are people in his administration who are fighting not to release it. So, the American people have to step up and say, and read the book, try to understand all this. It's complicated, but our future depends on it. This is a serious attack on our country.
Well,
and it's the Chinese, it's the Venezuelans, it's the Cubans, it's the Iranians. They've all, they're working together, and we can prove that.
Well, I want to. Yeah, the book is well written.
Will,
and
I want to say something.
Yes, sir.
Will, you brought up the name Mark Malek Brown. Bravo. Mark Malek Brown, ladies and gentlemen, was the number 2 in the United Nations under Kofi Annan for, I think, probably about 8 years. So what the cartel does is they pay for the most important officials and diplomats and celebrities around the world to stand in. So here you have a guy who was number 2 in the United Nations, and he's preaching about election integrity and the wonders of democracy, and he's working for a criminal cartel. He's a former British. He was assigned as like a British diplomat to the United Nations. He's number 2. Number 2. He was a deputy secretary general of the United Nations, and he leaves that to go to work for Smartmatic to be the chairman for Mujica, Anzola, and Peñate. What a whore he is.
Well, let me.
A whore.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Peñate because there's something that our audience doesn't know. He was one of the founding members of Smartmatic, but I want you to talk about where he's at now and what is he being charged with?
He's in jail in Miami.
That's right.
Because he was involved in stealing elections in the Philippines. He was the president. He was caught in a bribery case, affiliated that. People think it was just bribery to get the contract. No, it was bribery to get a result. But it's going to be more complicated than there'll be additional charges. There'll probably be superseding charges.
He's in an American jail right now. He's in American jail right now in Florida.
And he's president of Smartmatic.
And president of Smartmatic. And that's what people need to understand. These are bad people. These are bad people, and they have been for a long time. But yet, we're all supposed to say, oh, well, everything's okay and hunky-dory with the machines, and we're not even allowed to even look at the source code. It's proprietary. Right. It's ridiculous, and that is where we're at.
There's other senior officials in the company that are related to brother-in-law of Mujica, who was in charge of the source code for the United States. He's on the run. They've fled. Right. But the media won't cover that.
Yeah.
What you're doing is a real great public service here. Yeah. The media won't tell you the story. I retired from the CIA 20 years ago. I did years on Fox and CNN and all this. And I have to tell people now, after all this, after understanding what I do from this investigation and looking at the mainstream media and cable TV, they won't tell the truth. They're concealing, they're lying. Many of them are cowards.
And they're cowards. And a lot of these companies are now controlled by China. They have big big investments from China in them,
Yep.
or through money that comes through the cartel. So they're compromised as well. And so what we have to do to spread the word is depend on people like you, Will and Conrad. I mean, it is, we're fighting for our lives, basically. We're fighting for the future of the country. And our news media is ignoring the story.
Completely compromised.
Yeah.
Right.
Completely. The both mainstream media and cable news.
You know,
And I'm talking about Fox and Newsmax. Fox paid $787.5 million to Smartmatic to settle, and they knew they were innocent. They paid it anyway. Think about that.
Mm-hmm.
you know, you guys are doing a service by writing the book Stolen Elections. That's a big one. Going on shows, you know, Adam Carolla and all these, and making the plea to the president. But something else you guys are helping with here locally is you guys just endorsed Brian Norris for Secretary of State here in Arkansas. He's a 21-year Army veteran. He's a project manager, handles $1 million projects all over the world. But he's also the only one fighting against the machines. He's trying to
God bless him.
He's trying to get touchscreen machines out of our elections and get hand counts. What would you guys say to Arkansas voters about someone like a Brian Norris and why he's needed?
He's standing up. He's brave. He's speaking truth to power. Those in your state that are in denial are doing are putting our constitutional republic at risk. Ladies and gentlemen, I served in the armed forces. I was in the Air Force. I served in the CIA. I've taken the oath to the Constitution, multiple times. That's what this is about. None of us are getting rich here. All of us are here trying to save the country. And election theft was the mechanism by which our enemies, China, Russia, Iran, Cuba, sadly the Serbians too, and all these cartels and transnational criminal groups figured out was a way to damage America. And they almost succeeded. God bless Donald Trump for standing up and fighting back. Look, he's not perfect. There's some things that Donald Trump does that I don't agree with. I think he makes some mistakes, but 90% of the way I'm there. He is in the fight. He's standing up. He's taking the blows, and he is all about getting to those machines. So I'm with him.
And we go ahead, Ralph. Go ahead.
I would tell the citizens of Arkansas that, when you get into a campaign, it's very confusing. All of these guys are trained in public relations and they say all kinds of things. But look at one thing when you judge these candidates. Are they willing to reform the election system? Are they willing to get rid of the machines and go back to paper ballots with IDs and no calculating machines, not connected to any machinery or any computers that tally the votes in another country, but keep it all here and all safe and sound, and those are the people that you want to elect.
Well, I think that one of the computer scientists that I've talked to many of them who are cybersecurity experts, and the one thing that always stuck with me, and he said, "Listen, I've been in computers for 40 years. This is." And he said, "If you get a computer, and that's what these are. These machines are computers. Between the voter, and the final count, you can never ever be assured that your vote was counted. You simply cannot. There's no way to assure it. The only way to do it is a gold standard, which is a hand-marked paper ballot that is hand-counted with strict chain of custody, and you count everything in the open, recorded. That's how you run elections."
That's the way. And our top computer experts, people like Elon Musk, they say the same thing. Everybody who knows computers, they're not safe. There are always backdoors. There are always, they're connected to other servers and other communications equipment, and they're not needed. We don't need that technology.
No, and the cheerleader, you're right. And the cheerleaders for these companies are elected politicians who have no clue what they're talking about.
That's right.
I want to add something about all of this for your listeners. In some places, and it's like one of the mechanisms of stealing an election is they were stealing them at the scanners where they were counting mail-in votes.
Mm-hmm.
So they would put a mail-in vote on the scanner, take a picture, then take another picture, then take another picture, and they would say maybe do 50 or 100 of them. Then the machine is ready to take a photo of like 100 of it. It captures and saves them 50 or 100 at a time. What happens is, because it's hooked to the internet, that photo disappears and a photo comes in from Serbia. And now it takes a picture of 100 ballots that are all false, has the candidate of their choice. The state in question that's running the election then says during the audit process, you can only look at the machine. You're not allowed to look at the physical ballots in the box.
Right. We got about a minute left.
They designed this. This is the science of election theft. It's designed to defeat audit. In addition to stealing elections, they use the law to defeat audit. That's my last
100%.
statement.
And we saw that, Gary, in almost every state. We got about 45 seconds left. Ralph, do you have anything you want to add to this before we close out?
I want to just reiterate what you and Gary and Will have all said. Like, this is the biggest battle, biggest attack on our country since the Civil War. And we're here. We're living at this time. And it's our responsibility, all of us, to save our country. And,
right.
And the time is now. It's not 4 years from now. We can't wait for the president because he's fighting his own battles. We have to take a role in this.
Well, Ralph, I want to thank you and Gary for taking your time. We appreciate your being here. We got to close out now. I'm the Colonel of Truth, Conrad Reynolds and Will Huff, and we will talk to y'all next week. Thank you, guys.